How are you, Hunter?
Good.
Good. Get everything hooked up. Almost ready. Okay. Just my board up. All righty. So let's go ahead and take a look at our homework. We can go ahead and check that. I know that I had told you I was going to give y'all a page, and I decided just to hang on and get it to you today. So I didn't want to overload you with too much. So let's see. Lesson. Let's look at what we left off. We had page 51, activities 2. Is this right? 52 and 54, or was that our previous? Hold on. That was our previous one. So we had lesson 25. So we had to finish 55, and then we had activities 4 on 56. Is that right? And then on lesson 26, we started with our division, and let's see, y'all just had to finish up activities 2, right? The first, I guess, kind of 4 problems in that corner. And then we had activities 4 and 5 on page 58. All righty, well, let's go ahead and get started on lesson 25, activities 2. We're going to get those last 6 problems. We'll do the 3 across the top and then the 3 across the bottom. Let's see, so for activities 25. All right, so the first one is going to be 52.29. The one beside that to the right will be 30.488. And then on the last one on that top row is 0.67613. Then below that, we have 24.0382. Next to that, 3.96434. And then the last one on that row is 0.327450. Any questions on any of those multiplication of decimals? Is everybody good with those? All righty, now we will move on to activities 4 on page 56. Activities 4, we have to distribute first on this first one, and then solve, and you should have found that x is equal to 4. To 1, and then the third one on the top, and those. All right, and then below that, we had inequalities. The first one is x is less than -2. The one in the middle, x is greater than 6. And then the last one, x is less than 2. Any questions on our inequalities? Awesome. All right, and then move on to lesson 26, dividing decimals. We just had to finish up activities 2 on page 57. So the first one is decimal. No, I'm sorry, that's not a decimal. It's just a 5. The first one is 5. The one next to that to the right is going to be decimal 8. Then next row down, 0.7 divided into 2.1 is going to be 3. And then 0.5 divided into 2.5 is 5. Any questions on those? All righty. Move on to page 58. And we had activities 4. So activities 4, the first one, we have to distribute again and then solve for x. So x is equal to -19. Check for your negative sign, -19. The one next to that, x is equal to 2. And then the last one in that row, x is equal to 7. Any questions on those? Then inequalities below it, x is less than -1, x is less than -6, so x is less than -3. Did you remember to flip your sign? Because you should have ended up with -x is greater than 3. So if -x is greater than 3, you're dividing by -1 to get rid of that -x, and that causes you to flip that sign. So x is equal to, I'm sorry, x is less than -3. Any questions on activities 4? All right, activities 5. Okay, so we will go across the top row, middle, and then bottom. So first one in the top row is 207.0. The next one is 620.5. Then I have 143.0. Then 90.2. And then the last one in that top row, 110.4. Middle row, 218.36, 415.80, 147.56, 334.95, 167.24. And then the bottom row, 1.1573, 18.130, 65.272, 8.172, and then decimal 5780. Any questions on any of those? Fantastic, good job. Okay, and so that was dealing with, so we have looked at multiplying, adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing decimals. Okay. So let's see. But we did not start powers of 10 yet, right?
No.
Okay. Okay. So what we will do is so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and do our sections for today, and then I will be sending y'all, what I'll do is I will copy and have for you guys in class on Thursday our assignment packet that will be taken as a quiz, and I will email you yours this afternoon, so you'll have it for Thursday as well. For and so like I said, we're just going to kind of do a packet that will count as a quiz that'll kind of wrap up and just kind of move on with these skills instead of doing like a formal test and all that stuff. We'll just do a quiz, practicing the skills, and then that will count as a test grade. And then that way you don't have to do a test on it. We can just keep on moving. All right, so the next thing we're going to be looking at in this section, did I not have it? Let's see. Password problems. I'll look and see if I've loaded onto my iPad real quick. I have not. So hang on just a second. Let me get my blank workbook real quick. How's everybody feeling with decimals and everything like that? Everybody's good with everything? No questions? All right, so we've talked about how decimals are going to be smaller numbers. We've talked about the place value that they go in. We've talked about how a place after a decimal is our tenths place with the THS on it. After that, we have hundredths place, again with the TH on it. Then we go thousandths and things like that. So we're going to be looking at powers of 10 now that change, that go from place value to place value. Let's see, let me get this real quick. So that way we'll be able to. I've already had these pages loaded, but I did not see them, so almost finished. All right. That little corner. I got it. All right. So let me email this. All right, I finally got it. Okay, so we're going to be starting on page 59. And this is lesson 27, dealing with powers of 10. And so it says powers of 10 are the exponential values when the base is equal to 10. So we've talked about exponents before. We've talked about how exponents are those little numbers that are up in the top corner of our paper. or of our number. We've talked about how the base is going to be the big number, and then the exponent is the little number. And so when we use the number 10, we're talking about powers of 10, and we use the base of 10 and then our exponent. We talked about how the exponent, when we have the exponent 0, any number to the 0 power is going to be the number 1. Okay, so even 10 to the first is going to be 1. I'm sorry, 10 to the 0 is going to be 1. 10 to the first power just means that you have the number 10 one time. So that's going to be the number 10. 10 squared means I have 10 times 10. I'm multiplying 10 by itself 2 times, which is 100. But I also want you to notice that I can also look at these exponents and I can kind of correlate them. If I have 10 to the 0 power, that means I have a 1 with no zeros. If I have 10 to the first power, it means I have a 1 with 1 0. If I have 10 to the second power, I'm going to end up with a 1 with 2 zeros. 10 to the third, a 1 with 3 zeros. So when I'm dealing with powers of 10, I can look at that exponent to know how many zeros are going to follow my 1, okay? So it says the answer always begins with the number 1. The number of zeros after the 1 is equal to the number in the exponent. In other words, move the decimal point to the right, the number of places indicated in the exponent, and then fill in zeros if you need to. Okay, so that's with positive exponents. Notice that we would basically just move, we would start with 1, okay, if we started with, that's 1 decimal 0. So if I move my decimal over one place, that is 10. If I move it over another place, that becomes 100. And so I'm just filling in with those zeros to make my numbers get larger. So a positive exponent makes a larger number. But if we move down the page, it says, notice the pattern when the exponent decreases in increments of 1. So the first one, again, 10 to the 0 is just going to be 1. But 10 to the negative first means that I'm going to have a fraction, okay? Remember, a negative exponent means that I take the reciprocal of the number. I flip it. So 10 to the negative 1 would be the same as 10 over 1. So I flip it, and then I have a positive exponent in my denominator. So I can write 1 over 10 as decimal 1. So basically it starts with that 1 and my decimal moves one place to the left. 10 to the negative second power, I flip it. My 2 becomes positive in the denominator, so 10 to the second power. 10 squared is 10 times 10, which equals 100. And then I can write that as a decimal as decimal 0, 1. So whereas our hundredths place is 2 places to the right, a decimal in the hundreds place moves 2 decimals to the left. Same thing with 10 to the negative third. I flip it to make that 3 positive. It stays with the 10 in the denominator. 10 to the third is 10 times 10 times 10, or it's a 1 with 3 zeros. But then when I write it as a decimal, it's going to be decimal 0, 0, 1. So it says the answer always ends with the number 1. The number of digits to the right of the decimal point is equal to the absolute value of the number in the exponent. In other words, for negative exponents, write the number 1, and then move the decimal point to the left the number of places indicated by the exponent, and fill in the zeros in the blanks. So earlier when we looked at the exponent, we looked at the number, and that told us how many zeros would follow the 1. Now we're flipping it and saying, okay, well that exponent, so that 2 right here tells me I would have, I would move my decimal 2 places over. That decimal 3 tells me I would start at the 1 and move the decimal 3 places over. 1, 2, 3, okay? And then, to me, counting the zeros gets a little confusing if you don't remember that you've got that 0 before the decimal, okay? Here, I do have 2 zeros in front of 1, but they're separated by a decimal, okay? So I like to remember it as how many places you move that decimal place. So let's look at our examples in classwork. All right, we have 10 to the 5th power. That means I'm going to have 10 times 10 times 10 times 10 times 10, or I can write it as a 1 with 5 zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I can go back and fill in with my commas. Okay, same thing with 10 to the 9th. I write my 1 and 9 zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Whoop, I started to write a 9. And then I can go in and fill in with my zeros. 1, 2, 3, comma, 1, 2, 3, comma, 1, 2, 3, comma. Okay. Now, they're kind of bringing back a skill that we've previously worked on. If I multiply 10 to the 2nd power times 10 to the 3rd power, remember, if I multiply like bases, what do I do with those exponents? Now remember what we did? Add the exponents, good. So that means I would have 10 to the 5th because I would add 2 plus 5, okay? So 10 to the 5th, now I can just write the 1 with 5 zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, one of the things I could have done is written 10 with 2 zeros, I mean a 1 with 2 zeros and a 1 with 3 zeros and gotten 5 zeros also. All right, when I have like bases and exponents, but I divide, what do I do with my exponents? No, if we added when we multiplied, what do we do when we divide? Subtract them. Good, yeah. So now I have 10 to the 7th, 10 to the 10th divided by 10 to the 7th. So that means I'm going to subtract 10 minus 7 from my exponents. And what is 10 minus 7? 3. So I have 10 to the 3rd. So that means I have 1 with 3 zeros. Any questions on any of that? So one of the things that you'll start noticing as we go through pre-algebra, and especially when we get to algebra and move beyond, is that we start kind of learning skills in isolation. And then at some point, we kind of start pulling multiple skills into one problem. So like in these, we're not only learning about our powers of 10, but now we're having to remember back, if we're dealing with a power of 10 times a power of 10, we add the exponents. If we're dividing powers of 10, we subtract the exponents. So we're kind of starting to put these things together. All right, so 10 to the negative 5th power. Remember, I'm going to start with a 1. And right now, my decimal is to the right of 1. So having that negative 5th power means I need to move my decimal 5 places to the left and then backfill with zeros. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is where my decimal needs to move. So each of these places, I put a 0. So I've ended up with 0 decimal, 1, 2, 3, 4 zeros and a 1. Then 10 to the negative 9th again. I've got my 1 with my decimal. I need to move it to the left 9 places. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 is where it needs to move. Backfill with my zeros. So I've got 8 zeros. So that's going to be 0 decimal and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then the number 1. Everybody good with that? Always, it's hard because you always get confused, or I did, when I was doing positive and I would count the zeros, and I would always want it to be negative and count the zeros as well, but you always have to remember that because it's actually moving the place value to the left, you have to count that move from after the 1 to in front of the 1 counts as 1, but there's not a 0 there. So you're not just counting zeros like we did when we move it to the right. All right, 10 to the 8th power plus 10 to the negative 6th. So that's like I would write this as my base of 10. I'm going to write an 8. And what do we do when we multiply? What do we do to the exponents? We add them, right? So we're going to have 10 plus a negative 6. Now they're pulling those skills back in to where we started working with negatives and positives. We're adding a negative and a positive. When I'm adding unlike signs, I keep the sign of the larger and then find the difference. So 8 plus a negative 6 is going to be what? Positive 2, so 10 to the second power. So then when I write that, that's going to be 100. And then the next one, I've got 10 to the second divided by 10 to the negative first. And we said that when I divide, what do I do with my exponents? Subtract them. So that means I've got 10 to the second power minus a negative 1. So now when I have minus a negative, I know that I need to change that to, let me change my color real quick. I change it from subtraction to addition, and that means I have to change my sign that follows it, and it is a negative, so now it's a positive. So now I went from 2 minus a negative 1 to 2 plus a positive 1. And 2 plus 1 is 3, so now I have 10 to the third, which would simplify to be 1,000. Any questions about that? Everybody good with that? All right, so let's go ahead and I want you to practice with activities 2. Go ahead and work on the left-hand column of activities 2, and then we'll review them in just a minute. Let me know if you have questions though. We're doing the left-hand side of activities 2 on page 59. Close this one a little bit to make that screen a little bit brighter, but then I'll open this one a little bit. Make it hot. Okay, so let's take a look at these. So the first one, I had 10 to the fourth. What was my answer on that one? Huh?
10,000.
10,000, good. Now 10 to the seventh. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. What number is this? 10 million, good. Now I have 10 to the third times 10 to the sixth. What should we end up with? 10 to the ninth. Okay, so then I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, comma, comma. What number is this?
1 billion.
1 billion, good job. Billion with a B. All right, and then 10 to the 12th divided by 10 to the 5th will be 10 to the 7th, good. And we will be back at 10 million. All right, now let's do the right-hand side. We're dealing with our negative exponents here. So think about starting with your 1, move to the left. All right, so the first one, we have 10 to the negative 6. So we start with our 1 and go back 1, 2, 3, well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 places. So we put our decimal there, backfill with our zeros. So that means I'm going to have 0 decimal, 1, 2, 3, 4 zeros, and then a 1. 10 to the negative 8. Again, I start with my 1 and move to the left 8 places. That was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Backfill with my zeros. So I've got 0 decimal, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 zeros, and a 1. All right, 10 to the 7th times 10 to the negative 5th is going to equal 10 to the 2nd, which is going to be 100. And 10 to the 4th divided by 10 to the negative 1st. So I'm going to have 10 to the 4th minus a negative 1, which we talked about ends up becoming plus a positive. So 10 to the 4th plus 1 will be 10 to the 5th. So we're going to have 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Any questions about those? Everybody feel okay with those? Awesome. So dealing with our powers of 10, okay? So let's go ahead and turn to page 60. We will look at our homework for 60. We're going to keep practicing. We'll do activities 4 and 5 on page 60. And then we're going to move to page 61, multiplying by powers of 10. Okay, so working with those powers of 10, but now we're going to look about multiplying whole numbers and decimal numbers by those powers of 10 and how it's going to be very similar to what we've been doing when we just put the zeros and then move our decimal, okay? So it says, remember from lesson 27 that 10 to the 0 is 1, 10 to the first is 10, 10 to the second equals 10 times 10, which is equal to 100, and 10 to the third is 10 times 10 times 10, which equals 1,000, okay? Now think of it this way. 10 times 10 to the first, I'm sorry, 1 times 10 to the 0, good grief, I can't even get it out. 1 times 10 to the 0 is the same as saying 1 times 1. And 1 times 1 is 1. The next one, 1 times 10 to the first is the same as saying 1 times 10. 1 times 10 is 10. 1 times 10 to the second is the same as saying 1 times 10 times 10, which is 100. And 1 times 10 to the third is going to be the same as 1 times 10 times 10 times 10, which is going to equal 1,000. So now it's saying if instead of a 1 we had, then we could use the same process with a different whole number. So instead of 1, what if we had a 5? And if we had 5 times 10 to the 0, that would be 1, that would be 5 times 1 is 5. 5 times 10 to the first is 5 times 10, which is 50. 5 times 10 squared is 5 times 10 times 10, which is 500. 5 times 10 to the third is 5 times 10 times 10 times 10, which is 5,000. So we use the same process here. We just said, hey, instead of a 1, I'm going to use a 5. But then it says, notice how if we multiply powers of 10 by a decimal, look and see how the pattern changes. So 5.14 times 10 to the first, 10 to the first is 1, so we just have 5.14. If I multiply the same decimal times 10 to the first power, notice that when I multiply 5.14 times 10, that my decimal moved 1 place to the right. So it ends up being 51.4. So multiplying a decimal by 10 moves the decimal 1 place to the right. Multiplying by 10 squared, or 10 times 10, means I move my decimal 2 places to the right. So 5.14 becomes 514. 5.14 times 10 means I move my decimal 3 places to the right. So I have to put in that filler 0. So I end up with 5,140. Okay? So by multiplying a whole number by 10 powers of 10 or a decimal by powers of 10, that exponent tells me how many places to the right, I move that decimal. So let's go ahead and take a look at our classwork. 7 times 10 to the 0 power. 10 to the 0 is the same as 1, so that would be 7 times 1. So that would be 7. 2 times 10 to the first will be the same as 2 times 10, which equals 20. 9 times 10 to the second, that would be 9 times 10 times 10. You know, 10 times 10 is 100, and 100 times 9 would be 900. And 8 times 10 to the third would be 8 times 10 times 10 times 10. So that would be 8,000. Now if I have a decimal, 3.27 times 10 to the first will be the same as 3.27 times 1. So that's just going to stay 3.27, or 3 and 27 hundredths. Then 6.41 times 10 means I move my decimal one place to the right. So it becomes 64.1. 5.87 times 10 to the second means I move my decimal 2 places to the right. So I have 587. 9.25 times 10 to the third means I move my decimal 1, 2, 3 places to the right. I've got to add in a 0, so I end up with 9,250. Then I have 12.4 times 10 to the 0, which is the same as 12.4 times 1. That's going to be 12.4. 69.5 times 10 to the first. I need to move my decimal one place to the right, so 695. 31.6 times 10 to the second. Move my decimal 1 2 places, add a 0, so I have 3,160. 74.2 times 3, I need to move it 1 2 3 places, add in 2 zeros, so I end up with 74,200. And then the last section, 0.514 times 10 to the 0. 10 to the 0 is equal to 1, so I have 0.514. 0.873 times 10 to the first power. Move my decimal to the right one. So I now have 8.7396. And then the next one, 0.267 times 10 to the second. Move it 1 2 places. That'll give me 26.7. And 0.951 times 10 to the third. 1 2 3 places becomes 951. Everybody pretty comfortable understanding multiplying by the power of 10 just means you move your decimal place that many places. All right, so we're going to go ahead and work on activities 2 on page 61. Go ahead and work on all of them if you haven't already. It should be, we got about 5 more minutes before the break. Yeah. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at these. There we go. 6 times 10 to the 0 is the same as 6 times 1, which is 6. 0.4 times 10 to the first Move my decimal in one place, so it becomes 4.12 times 10 to the second power becomes 12. 7.85 times 10 to the third power becomes 7,850. And then over to the side, 3.84 times 10 to the first, which is the same as times 1, 3.48. I said 84, I said that backwards, 48. 0.683 times 10 to the first, to move it one place, so 6 decimal 83. 87.9 times 10 to the second, move my decimal 2 places, so it becomes 8,790. 10 to the third times 0.056 means I need to move it 1, 2, 3 places, so it just becomes 56. Okay. Any questions? Awesome. Okay, so on the next page, we will have activities 4 and 5. One of the things I do want to mention that as I was kind of going through and grading homework, one thing that I wanted to show, actually it's going to be back in, let's see which lesson it was. Oh, not that one. Wasn't multiplication, that's going to be subtraction. Okay, one of the things I want to show you is when I'm subtracting, and as far as my places go, and I did not have a 0 there, and I filled it in, remember that when I'm subtracting from 0, I cannot subtract from 0. So like in this problem, I would be doing 2 or 0 minus 2. I cannot take 2 away from 0, so that's where I have to borrow. That 0 became a 10, my 2 becomes a 1. So then I was able to say 10 minus 2 is 8. Now I move on and I've got 1 minus 3. I can't do that, so I have to borrow from the 9. That becomes a 9, item becomes an 8, and now my 1 became a 3. So the main thing I wanted to make sure of is that when you add that placeholder 0 in the problem, make sure you subtract from that, okay? And remember that 0 minus 2 is not 2. You have to treat it as, first of all, it would have to become a 10, and you're borrowed from the neighbor next door, okay? So be real careful about that here. I would have, I would end up with 2 placeholder zeros. So this would become a 10. This one would have to become a 10, but because I borrowed from him, it will become a 9. And then that one would have to become a 1. Okay, so remember your rules about subtraction, about subtracting from 0, borrowing a group of 10 from the neighbor, that kind of stuff when you're subtracting decimals. When you're adding, obviously, it doesn't matter because it's going to end up not changing your value, but it does affect your value when you're subtracting, okay? I think that was only one of the things that I ran across as I was grading work as I was putting the grades in and stuff. I saw a couple of those things. All right, so it's about break time, so any minute now, the bell should ring. Isn't that right? Or is it 1:35? No, it's 1:30 that it usually breaks. So any minute now, we will take our break. So we'll go ahead and plan on doing our break. And then when we come back, we will pick back up with lesson 29. And what I'm going to do is I'll go ahead and get copies of these real quick. And then that way, I didn't have. There it is.
Ooh, not Lego. I knew she wrote down on my email. But you haven't heard of it. So that I already navigated to that. I thought I remembered. 9. Oh, where? Oh, I'm looking at the wrong thing. 9. Let's see. I've got hers today. Okay. I have my phone. I forgot you guys. Okay. Now I'm gonna write it down. You got it down? Lesson 27. Or yeah, it went down 28. Lesson 27 is 62 actions 25. That's what that is. No, it's not. It is. It's 29. She wrote down 27. She's cute. No, that's so.
All righty.
Oh, yeah. Okay, sure. That's true.
Okay, let me get my screen back up. Okay, so we looked at our powers of 10. We looked at multiplying by powers of 10. Now we're going to look at dividing by powers of 10. Okay, so when we multiplied, we saw that our decimal moved from where it was to the right, the number of places. When I'm dividing, I'm going to do that differently. Okay, and you can see here I've even written some notes on my little copy of the book where I wrote multiply with negative exponents, decimal moves left. Okay, so you've got your number, then you move your decimal to the left, and then
We can't see.
oh, sorry, it didn't. Sorry, I thought I shared it again. Here it comes. On my screen. There we go. Oh, there we go. Let me move it around. Got it. Okay. So let's go ahead and take a look. Dividing by powers of 10. So it says, remember from lesson 27. We just went over that ago, that when I had a negative exponent is the same as dividing by the power of 10. Okay, so when I look here, we can see that, and actually they should have changed this to dividing by, 5 times 10 to the first is the same as 5 divided by 1. 5 times 10 to the negative first is the same as 5 divided by 10 to the first. 5 times 10 to the negative second is the same as 5 divided by 10 to the second. And 5 times 10 to the negative third is the same as 5 divided by 10 to the third. Okay, so basically they said if I have 5 divided by 10 to the first, that's the same as 5 divided by 10. So that becomes my decimal 0.5. I started with a 5 and I moved my decimal to the left 1. 5 divided by 100, start with 5, move your decimal 2 places to the left. 5 divided by 1,000, start with a 5, move your decimal 3 places to the left. So I wrote a little note that says, multiply with negative exponents, decimal moves left. Okay, so dividing by a positive exponent and multiplying by a negative exponent means that decimal moves to the left. Okay. So if we're doing the same thing with numbers with decimals, like we did earlier, if I have 5.14 divided by 10 to the 0, that's the same as 5.14 divided by 1. So it just stays 5.14. 5.14 divided by 10 to the first is the same as 5.14 divided by 10. So my decimal moves one place to the left, so it becomes decimal 514. 5.14 divided by 100, my decimal place moves 2 places, so I have to put in a 0, so it becomes 0.0514. And 514 divided by 1,000 means I move 1, 2, 3 places to the left, fill in with a couple of zeros, so I have decimal 00514. Multiply, move it to the right, divide, move to the left, or if I multiply by a negative exponent, that is the same as dividing by a positive exponent, okay? So think about those those inverse operations, multiplication and division, how then you're gonna have, one's gonna have a positive exponent, one's gonna have a negative. The decimal point moves to the left, the number of places indicated in the exponent. Notice that if you are dividing by a power of 10 with a negative exponent, this is the same as multiplying by a power of 10 with a positive exponent. Okay, so if you divide by a positive, that's the same as multiplying by a negative. But if you divide by a negative, that's the same as multiplying by a positive. So you flip your operations and flip the positives and negatives. Let's take a look at some of these. 9 times 10 to the 0 power. We said 10 to the 0 is the same as 1, and 9 times 1 is 9. 3 times 10 to the negative first power is the same as 3 divided by 10 to the first. So that's going to be 3 divided by 10, which means I would move my decimal one place to the left, so it's going to be decimal 3. 14 times 10 to the negative second power will be the same as 14 divided by 10 to the second power, which is the same as 14 divided by 100. That would imply that I would move my decimal 2 places to the left. So I would have decimal 14. 22 times 10 to the negative third would be the same as 22 divided by 10 to the third, which would be 22 divided by 1,000. That means you'd have 22, your decimal moves 3 places, 1, 2, 3 places to the left. So you'd have 0.022. And putting a 0 in front of the decimal or not putting a 0 in front of the decimal is going to be the same thing. It doesn't matter. It's not going to change the value. You can either have a 0 there like I do here, or no 0 like there. Either way, whatever you're comfortable with. All right, 3.14 divided by 10 to the 0 power. It's the same as 3.14 divided by 1, so it stays 3.14. 9.26 divided by 10 to the first means I'm going to move my decimal one place to the left, so 0.926. 52.87 divided by 10 to the second, move your decimal 2 places to the left, so decimal 5287. And 76.53 divided by 10 to the third is the same as moving your decimal 1, 2, 3 places. So I have a decimal before. So decimal 0.7653. All right, now I've got some small decimal numbers divided by my powers. So divided by 1 just stays the same, 0.682. Divided by 10 to the first means I move my decimal one place, so 0.0682. That's not right because that's a 5-4. I just was looking at the number right in front of it, right on top of it. 0.18 divided by 2, move my decimal 2 places. Oh, 1, 2. Put my decimal, fill in with a 0, decimal 0, 0, 1, 8. And 0.9 divided by 10 to the third, 1, 2, 3. Decimal, fill in 2 places, 5 decimal, 0, 0, 0, 9. Any questions about these? Y'all feeling pretty comfortable with just moving those decimals based on whether you're dividing or multiplying by negative? Now what did I mean here? Add power with negative exponents. Okay, so what I wrote right there, but basically this, what I've said is that if I have a negative exponent, then you need to remember that if you're dividing, if you're dividing like usual, so let me uncircle that real quick. So if I had 5.19 divided by 10 to the second power, okay, that means I would divide, I would move my decimal 2 places, so I'd end up with decimal 0.519. On this next one, if I'm dividing and I have a negative exponent, that is the same as multiplying by a positive exponent, okay? Whoop. Let that go away. So basically, when I have that 5.19 divided by 10 to the negative second power, that would equal 5.19 times 10 to the second power. And so that means my decimal would be moved 2 places to the right. So that's what I have here. If I'm dividing with a positive exponent, your decimal moves left. If I'm dividing with a negative exponent, your decimal moves to the right. Okay? But I don't know that necessarily. I guess I just wrote a note on there just to know that because it doesn't have any doing that. All right, let's look at activities 2. Let's do this first column. I have 7 times 10 to the 0, which is the same as 7 times 1. That is 7. All right, 6 times 10 to the negative first is the same as 6 divided by 10 to the first. So which way will my decimal move here? I started out with 6 times 10 to the negative first. We said that that was going to be the same as 6 divided by 10 to the first. So when I divide by a positive exponent, my decimal moves to the left. So it would be decimal 6. The next one is 25 times 10 to the negative second power. That is the same as 25 divided by 10 to the second power. I've changed from division to multiplication, from multiplication to division. Therefore, my exponent goes from negative to positive. So now if I'm dividing by 10 to the second power, my decimal moves 2 places to the left. So I end up with decimal 25. Go ahead and do that last one. Change from multiplication to division. Your exponent goes from being negative to positive. So your decimal will move 3 places to the left. So 0.038. I'm going to erase this so we can Okay, go ahead and work that middle column. And then we'll check them. Bless you.
Thank you.
Once you finish that column, look up and see and check your answers. 4.57, 0.295, 0.4319, and 0.08627. Any questions? All right, last column. And then look up and check your answers. 0.385, 0.049, 0.0082, and 0.0001. All righty, let's go ahead and move along to page 64. And your homework will be activities 4, 5, just 4 and 5. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at what all of our homework is for today. Make sure we've got it all written down. Make sure we didn't forget anything. So we started back on page 59. Sorry, I've got the oldies. Okay, so let's see, we've got page 60. Activities 4 and 5. We have page 62, activities 4 and 5. And then 64, activities 4 and 5. So 60, 62, 64, all activities 4 and 5. And we can go ahead and start working on those now. Notice though that, let's see, is activity 4 on all of them? So activity 4 on the last page, on the last assignment, page 64, be sure to pay attention to when we're dealing with inequalities. Remember, when I have that inequality sign, that if I have to multiply or divide by a negative number, I need to flip my sign. And one of the things I want to mention, it won't necessarily be for that problem, but just to mention that if I had a negative x is greater than 3, and I needed to change, I always want to report my variable as being positive, okay? So to do that, I could multiply by, actually I won't use x because it's I could multiply both of these by -1. But if I do that, I've got to be sure to flip my sign. So x would be less than -3. So if I change my sign, negative x is greater than 3, then I'm going to have x is less than -3. Okay, so if I'm changing this sign there and this sign here, my sign has to find my inequality has to flip. Okay, so like I said, you may not even experience that in any of these. I just wanted to make sure we reviewed that just in case. If you end up with a negative variable, to change it to a positive variable, basically you just multiply by a -1. But if it's an inequality, then I know that because I've multiplied by a negative, I flip my sign. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. You can go ahead and get started on this homework on pages 60, 62, and 64. If you have questions, be sure to let me know so I can help you. And I was going to tell y'all, if y'all had any pages that I emailed you that I was missing for you, you can go ahead and pull them and I can look at them right now. And then that way you don't have to worry about uploading them. I was going to pull up the emails that I sent and let's see. Okay, Lex says page 51. Real quick, and I'll get that. Okay, what is yours? I can look back at my email. I sent your test practice directions. Okay. Page 38, activities 3 and 4. That's the first one. Okay. And then it dawned on me, when I sent this, it wasn't even the day that that other stuff was to be posted, so I'm sorry.
It's okay.
So, did you go ahead and post those?
No, because I.
Okay, perfect.
Do you want me to whenever I get home?
Huh?
Do you want me to?
No,
whenever
it's
I
fine. I was gonna say, I can get them out, and then you won't have to worry about it.
Okay.
So let's see, that was pages 55 activities 2, 56 activities 4, 57 activities 2, and 58. So 55, 56, 57, 58. All right. 55. Hold on, I took a picture of the whole screen. I said this. Right. 55. So 55, 57, 58, 59, 56, 57. But there we go. Awesome, thank you. Did you have any that we needed to catch up on? Let's see, that's going to be page 18. And five. So you get caught up on that one. Actually, it was just the first two columns on each row. So go ahead and circle those 4 columns right there. Put that down. And then right to these 2. And page 20, activities 3 and 4. Okay, I sent everybody the test back for corrections and make sure of that. So let's see. What's this? Corrections, manufacturer. So, for your test corrections, if y'all can send those to me, you can either, if you want to bring them on Thursday, you can bring them, or if you want to upload them or whatever, you can text them or email them to me by Thursday. Okay, and so then I'll get your final grades in for that. This is our last week of grading for this grading period. This is our last week, week 8. So then that means we'll have 8 more weeks, and then we'll be out for Christmas. And then we'll come back, and we'll have 16 weeks for the following year and for the rest of the year. So, so the final grades will be finished up. If not by the end of the week, it'll be. If I get your corrections on Thursday, I'll probably have them over the weekend. So you'll have your finalized grade for this first period next week, and then so we're in. Trying to remember our dates. Okay, so we're here. No, we're out next week. And then the week after that, we have fall break. Okay, so then we're off for a week. So we're home for a week, we're off for a week, and then we'll be back here. So even though it's kind of a crazy time, it's moving along. So hopefully we'll get through all this mess pretty soon.
Miss Jennifer,
Yes, sir.
I finished my homework.
Awesome. You're all done? Okay, any questions about any of it?
Well, actually, yeah,
Okay.
there's one. Okay, so it's on page 60,
Page 60, okay.
activity 4, the top middle one.
That 7x plus 12 divided by 4, that one? Okay, so think about your order of operations, okay? What do we need to do, or what can I do to combine like terms on that left-hand side?
Yes, I did that, but I got 3x remaining.
Okay, so you would have, so if you look at that one, you're only going to divide 12 divided by 4, right? So you'd have 7x plus, what is 12 divided by 4?
3. So
Okay, so you'd have 7x plus 3 is equal to 4x plus 3. Okay, so now you're going to need to move that 4x from the right to the left. So you have 3x plus 12 equals 3. Now you're going to need to move that 12. How are you going to move it?
12?
Yeah, on the, I'm sorry, not 12, 3. Sorry, you've got that 3 to move. So how are you going to move that 3 on the left-hand side?
Subtract it from both sides.
Okay, subtract it from both sides. So now we're going to have 3x is equal to what?
Well, I subtracted the 3's on both sides because it's 3x plus 3 equals 3.
Okay, so when you subtracted 3 on both sides, you still end up with 3x on one side. On the other side, when you took away 3, what is 3 minus 3?
Nothing.
0.
0.
So you would have 3x equals 0. Divide by 3, divide by 3. So what does x equal? What is 0 divided by 3?
Equals 0.
0. Good. Yeah. Awesome. Good job. Alrighty, so if you are done, then you can go ahead and log off and you are done for the day. I will email you this packet that we'll be working on Thursday that I'll be handing out. That'll be kind of our final quiz grade that it'll be due next Monday. Okay, so a week from today, but I'll go ahead and email it to you in just a few minutes. Okay, well, have a great day and I will see you on Thursday.
Will do.
All right, bye, Hunter.